Good morning, my name is Alix. I'm a campaigner from Greenpeace Australia Pacific, and I'm here today underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge with Dr. Kim Loo. We are standing in front of the Harbour Bridge where 3 Greenpeace supporters have climbed underneath the bridge. They've unfurled 3 beautiful flags, and they've also been holding banners. We're here today to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. We're a few days out of the election, and we know that this election has been the climate election, but we're yet to see any action from Scott Morrison. So Dr. Kim Loo, could you tell me why you're joining us here today?
Because there's a climate health emergency. 3,000 people die from breathing in air pollution each year, which is more than the national road toll. We've just had our hottest January, and heat waves are the greatest killer of Australians in the last 100 years in comparison to the total number of natural disasters. I work in Western Sydney, and we're frequently 7 to 10 degrees hotter there, and the number of deaths in Western Sydney is 3 times more than the rest of Sydney. And I work in general practice where I see the impacts of climate change on my patients now, the heat and the air pollution. We know that in New South Wales, 279 people die from breathing in the pollution from coal-fired power stations. My patients are impacted, my most vulnerable patients are impacted by the heat, and my patients have lived through 47.9 degrees heat in Richmond. The young kids who are so vulnerable are the most impacted. All my patients with chronic diseases, with heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, diabetes, all my patients who work outside, all my poor patients, all my patients who live in isolation are impacted. And not only do we have the heat in summer, but we have the ground level ozone. I've had my patient die in January from the heat and the ground level ozone, who's one of my elderly patients with heart disease. And the air pollution. In Western Sydney, we get the particulate pollution from the coal-fired power stations in the Hunter Valley. And the chronic exposure causes heart disease, lung disease, increases the risk of heart attacks, increases the risk of type 2 diabetes and mothers having smaller babies because mothers breathe in the air pollution and impacts on the growth of children in utero. It is a climate emergency. We are impacted now. Our government has to take notice in our health, and they have to put health front and centre of every single decision they make.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. So it sounds like what you're saying, that coal has an impact on people's health in many different ways.
It absolutely does.
Could you explain what you mean by ozone pollution?
Ozone pollution is it's a photochemical reaction that occurs when you have oxides of nitrogen, or NOxes, which we get from the coal-fired power stations, plus from traffic, from motor vehicles, mixing with the volatile organic chemicals, and this mixes and becomes ground level smog. And the problem with ground level smog is there is no safe level we can breathe in. It irritates even normal lungs, and people who already have a heart or lung disease are greatly impacted. Children are more impacted because during hot weather they go outside and play, so they're more impacted. People who have to work outside have no choice but work outside on days that might potentially have high levels of ground level ozone.
So ozone pollution, it's air pollution.
It's air pollution. Yeah. It's air pollution. So we have air pollution, which is, we've got the fine and the bigger particulate matter, we've got the sulfur dioxides, we've got the NOxes, we've got the ozone. We have 93 other things that are measured in Australia with National Pollution Inventory. In the US, they measure over 500.
Wow.
And air pollution, people think that Australia is clean compared to India. But in Australia, our ambient air quality, we've got 44 monitors in New South Wales that monitor the ambient air quality. And near the coal-fired power stations in Western Sydney, we actually have the levels higher than it's acceptable for healthy humans on a very regular basis. And the levels we accept for sulfur dioxides and oxides of nitrogen is 20 times more than China, Europe and the UK. And that's currently being reviewed by the Victorian EPA. So a discussion paper is going to be released in the next week.
Some really shocking numbers and facts and figures there, and
Oh.
particularly that number you were saying, was it 279
People die from generating electricity in New South Wales, where we rely on 80% black coal.
And so is that from air pollution, those deaths?
Those deaths are from air pollution.
So that's not even counting people who are dying from heat waves, from other climate change impacts, and is that just New South Wales?
That's just
you're
New South
saying?
Wales.
So across the country, I assume that number would be
This is the
bigger.
most recent study in December from the Environmental Justice Australia.
Okay, yeah, and so it's interesting because that's what, 279 just from air pollution just in New South Wales. If you consider what the number might be across the country, and then consider the number from people who have died from other climate impacts like heat waves and floods or droughts or bushfires.
The cost to the economy is massive. See, the externality of actually burning fossil fuels is not taken into account. And this is going to be a massive emergency for our health sector. In the years when if we have inaction, with inaction we'll get to 4 degrees. We're going to have a wasteland in Western Sydney if we get to 4 degrees when the temperatures are already so high now. It's absolutely appalling. It's a medical emergency, a climate emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Dr. Kim Loo, thank you so much. Again, we are here today to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. This is the climate election. We're a few days out. It's time that Scott Morrison steps up and actually does something good on climate.